We were selected by the Council on State Governments to be a national learning site for other agencies to roll out this programming. So that's given us, you know, sort of an audience that listens to what we're doing. But beyond that, I worked with a group down at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health in DC, along with Chief Del Pozo from the Burlington, Vermont Police Department, some medical practitioners from Johns Hopkins, and a couple of former drug czars. So it was a small group of about 10 or 12 of us, and we authored the 10 standards of care that communities across America should be employing in dealing with the opiate crisis. And you know, a lot of this is directly related to mental health. There's a lot of co-occurring disorders going on. And so we have published the 10 standards of care that any mayor or governor or city manager or town manager can go and sort of see in a white paper what their community should be doing to meet the standard of care that's really going on in other more advanced jurisdictions. And that was incredibly rewarding to sit in that room with that group of people. I learned more than I brought, and I really tried to be.
Sure, others might contest that, but I'm going to let you go.
I try to be an active listener, and you know what we published from that. I mean, we locked ourselves in a room for 2 days, but for meals, I mean, we were laser focused, and you know what resulted from that, I think, is really an extraordinary piece of work, where you know public safety wasn't operating in their silo, and public health in their silo. We truly took the leaders across America in the same room, and it resulted in this white paper, which is, I've had calls from mayors and city managers all across America, you know, thanking us for our work and then asking for further guidance. But the point is, James, you know, what we did in Arlington around the opiate epidemic, you know, there was no political influence to do it. There was no community really, or segment of the community driving us to do it. Our values drove us to do it. And you know, I've talked in the community about how we've moved away from being a rules-based law enforcement agency to an agency that's driven by its value system. And you know, this whole narrative around, you know, opiate disorder being a moral failing is absurd. The science is abundantly clear that it's a medical condition no different than any other chronic medical condition, and that medication treatment therapy options result in a higher likelihood of driving down recidivism and relapse, and that we've got to be, you know, the term junkie and felon and all that stuff. You know, and these red dots and maps, you know, I get the value of them. They drive me crazy, because whenever I see a map with all the red dots or the fatalities, I think behind every one of those red dots is a family and love and faith, and they've lost somebody to this epidemic. And Fred Ryan's opinion, the federal government hasn't brought the necessary sense of urgency to the issue, nor the necessary resources to effectively tackle the issue. We're allowing anecdote and emotion to drive policy rather than let science drive policy.
Mm-hmm. Well, clearly science has fallen on some hard times when it comes to finding an audience on the national level at the moment. So, you know, we'll keep our fingers crossed that can change. But you know, for the umpteenth time, I think we're grateful to be living in a community in which you know, the actual data, the current science, the best wisdom that you can both you know, that you have gained from your guys' collective experience out in the field, but also that you can take from what people who are working in this area are saying. Bringing all that to bear is clearly what's been happening. And
But if I may, James, there's still a lot of work to do. You know, just 2 weeks ago, I was literally coming from the State House working on this issue when I was on Concord Turnpike when the radio call went out for an overdose, just a couple blocks from here. And so being nearby, I responded along with other Arlington officers and firefighters, and it was a fatality, a 25-year-old young man that we all went to extraordinary measures with Narcan, and our great firefighters put the CPR machine on, and we were unable to bring him back. You know, most of them we are successful at reversing with Narcan, but this issue hasn't gone away in our community, and in many ways, we see a situation such as that as a failure. You know, how could we have prevented this? And we go back and look at and reconstruct that case, and was that person on our radar? And could we have been more supportive to he and his loved ones? And there's a lot of work to be done. You know, we've made progress, but we are not going to rest on our laurels. We are still laser focused. You know, if we were losing pedestrians on Mass Ave at this rate, my phone would be ringing off the hook. The fact is, my phone never rings after an opiate overdose, death. And so we'll bring the sense of urgency necessary to this.
Right, you guys
crisis.
are the ones who know, as you just said. I mean, that's news to me that this happened a couple of weeks ago. Again, I'm paying attention. I wanted to ask you about solitary confinement. People watching and others may think, well, there must be some reasons for people, good reasons for people to go to solitary confinement. Are there?
Well, I'm sure there are reasons to separate people from the population. You know, say, you know, people kill people, people harm others, they're dangerous, they're causing a problem. In that case, okay, so we separate them from the population. But how long do we do that? How do we address the issue? How do we fix the issue? Can you imagine taking a person out of the population, placing them in a 6x8 cell, 23 hours a day, no contact, one guy told me it took him 6 months to get a book to read. Either the lights are left on all day, 1 hour out. Sometimes they don't even get that hour out. Who could even imagine being locked away like that for 10 years, up to 10 years or more?
Yeah, I have to say, you could take a healthy person, you know, a by the books person, et cetera, put them in those kinds of conditions, and you're going to end up with a basket case, I would think, at least.
You're going to lose your mind. You know, I read something one time that says segregation harms one physically, but it also scars the soul. It just takes you lose your mind. I think about it and it just bothers me inside, you know? I don't know how we justify going to sleep at night knowing that a person is being kept like that. How is there no way that we can think about that person earning their way back? All you can hear is what's going on around you. How can we not reach out to that person to find out if they need any care, if they can reach out to their family, if they're better, if they're sorry? You know, why don't we just give them the death sentence? How long do you keep a person like that? You know? How do we keep from becoming the beast that we've locked up? How do we not care? It's just, it can't be the solution.
Yeah.
You know, it just can't be.
Yeah, there are studies and other evidence that would indicate that kind of isolation is part of a torture protocol, practically. Yeah. I mean, again, you're talking about how bad would a person have to behave in order to justify society's treating them in the way that you've just described.
Right.
It's unfathomable.
And now that it's in place, we talk about the overuse and the misuse. So for what it was created for, now you're using it for all kinds of things. So that's when it's out of hand. That's when you need the oversight. What are you using it for now? You asked me earlier, what does it take to get there? What are they? What does it take? You know, we're hearing all kinds of reasons that people are being placed in solitary. I'm sure it's not being done by the book, you know, so we need to look into that. You just can't lock people up for whatever you feel.
Yeah, and as you said, oversight is huge because you just can't leave it up to the discretion of other humans with the same kinds of weaknesses and the same kinds of, you know, they may be having a bad day or whatever, and we can't just allow, I assume, responsibility for, you know, this kind of treatment of somebody to be instigated because somebody, you know, because a prison official is
feeling some kind of way, okay?
Yeah.
So,
it's
I think not.
Very, you know, a very intractable issue among many in terms of criminal justice reform.
Yeah.
And as you already mentioned, there are reasons to be hopeful about the current legislation being considered. Let us hope, indeed, that it comes out in the form that you're anticipating, that we're anticipating.
Yes.
And that we have reason to celebrate that,
yes.
But also, more importantly, it begins to play out through the system.
Right on.
So that people don't end up in the situation you've well described.
These people, because of their service to our country, have access to programming that maybe others don't. That's why it works. And sadly, that's a model that we should be replicating for general population, not just for veterans as well.
And we had a chance to talk to one of the residents of the Humvee unit to find out what his experience has been. Brendan, first of all, obviously if you're in the Humvee unit, that means that you are a veteran of one of our military services. So which service were you in?
Air Force. I was in the United States Air Force, F4 crew chief.
And how long and in what time period?
I was counting delayed enlistment, 79 to 84. During, I guess it was supposed to be peacetime, but Lebanon, Grenada.
So you saw some action even though it was supposed to be peacetime, is what it sounds like?
Yeah, indirectly. I mean, the Air Force is a little bit further from the action until we actually fly over. But.
And then, so that it ended obviously about 25 years ago almost. So there was a good length of time between that. But then let's just skip forward, and for whatever reasons you find yourself within this facility.
Yep.
And I know that the Humvee unit itself opened back in 2016. I think January, March, somewhere in that area. Are you one of that kind of original group of folks who came into the unit in that general period?
Not the very beginning, but close. I think it opened in January, and I came in the end of March or April, something like that.
And how did that come to be? Were you do you have to self-select? Do you have to try and get into that unit? Was it offered to you? Tell us a little bit. From an inmate's perspective, how do you end up in a unit like that?
Well, I was originally at the Essex Correctional Facility in Middleton, and the veterans officer in the facility approached me and asked me if I wanted to interview to come to this unit here. And as he described it at the time, it sounded great. I said, sure, definitely.
And obviously there was no such unit in Essex at that time.
No, there isn't to this day
still
either.
isn't.
This is the only one in Massachusetts, and at the time, either the first or one of the first in the country. We've had other jurisdictions, states, sheriffs come in and tour the facility, so it's quite a prototype.
And so, obviously, it is a facility that is restricted to, or the people who are eligible for it are all veterans. of the armed forces in one way or the other, and I understand it also includes ROTC and other, folks who may or may not have seen action of any particular sort. But aside from the fact that it is composed of people from the military services, what's different about this unit than other kinds of situations here at the jail?
Well, to go from the sublime to the ridiculous, there are units where you are in a cell 22 to 23 hours a day. At the Humvee, it's set up like a barracks, first of all, so everybody being a veteran's very used to a barracks type setting. We can interact a lot more. And in this unit, even since I've been here, the amount of support from the outside and the amount of support that the sheriff's been able to, I guess, coordinate and facilitate, and it's actually mind-boggling.
Tell us a little bit about that. You said amount of support from the outside. Give us a couple of examples.
We have people from the VA hospitals, the veteran service offices around the cities and towns that come in here, and they interview veterans. They do one-on-one counseling with veterans. They do group therapy. The sheriff has opened up the in-house education programs like the janitorial, culinary to people in the Humvee. There are the latest Middlesex Community College teaches a course here, and the national program, the Inside Out program from Framingham State. They actually bring 10 students from Framingham State in to take a class with 10 inmates from here.